welcome to another edition of The Word. I'm happy to have you here with me today. Today's topic will be, does God condone drinking? Now, since the time of Genesis, man has had wine and beer. Over thousands of years, the use of this drug rose to such epic proportions that it was banned in the U.S. Many communities introduced alcohol bans in the late 19th and early 20th century. And enforcement of these new prohibition laws, it became a topic of debate. Prohibition supporters, they called them dries, presented it as a battle for public morals and health. Finally, in January of 1920, a nationwide ban of all alcohol consumption and distribution went into effect. Prohibition in the U.S. was a nationwide constitutional ban on the production, importation, transportation, and sale of alcoholic beverages. And this was from 1920 to 1933. Okay? Now, prohibitionists, led by Protestant extremists, aimed to heal what they saw as an ill society beset by alcohol-related problems such as alcoholism, family violence, and saloon-based political corruption as well. And we kind of see that today, right? This ban lasted 13 years, during which many creative ways were thought of to continue consuming alcohol. Amongst them, well-known, moonshine, most prominent. And, it produced some very strong mixes in very dangerous situations, blow them up and stuff. So physicians even wrote an estimated 11 million prescriptions a year throughout the 1920s. This was for medicinal spirits. Finally, the Prohibition Commissioner John F. Kramer cited one doctor who wrote 475 prescriptions for whiskey in just one day. So it's kind of like the marijuana prescriptions we see today, right? So Prohibition had created a big black market that competed with the formal economy, which came under pressure when the Great Depression came. So you got all this booze being sold, you got the Great Depression, it was a mess. State governments urgently needed the tax revenue. So of course, Franklin Roosevelt got elected based mainly on the fact that he was going to overturn prohibition. And in the end, it was that greed that ultimately re-legalized the drug. And yes, folks, I did say drug. Alcohol is a drug. It's as much a drug as marijuana, cocaine, meth, or any other illegal drug. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's not a drug. We see almost the same thing happening now with marijuana. The government finally woke up to the huge profits that it could make in taxes. Right? And it's there for the taking just by legalizing marijuana, which is already widely used illegally. So, what is God's take on the use of drugs? Well, in Proverbs chapter 31, verses 6 through 7, we are told, "Let beer be for those who are perishing, wine for those who are in anguish. Let them drink and forget their poverty, and remember their misery no more." Well, kind of seems like the Bible is telling us to drink beer and wine, even back in the times of Noah. Take Genesis chapter 9, verses 20 to 21. Noah, a man of the soil, proceeded to plant a vineyard. When he drank some of its wine, he became drunk and lay uncovered inside his tent. So Noah got drunk. Yeah. The Bible speaks of Noah becoming drunk, but it doesn't tell you anything about God being upset or punishing him or anything like that. In Proverbs chapter 3 verses 9 through 10, it states, "Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine." And again, here we have it in Deuteronomy chapter 11 verses 13 to 15. The Bible says, "So if you faithfully obey the commands I am giving you today, to love the Lord your God, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul, then I will send rain on your land in its season, both autumn and spring rains, so that you may gather in your grain new wine and olive oil. I will provide grass in the fields for your cattle, and you will eat and be satisfied." You know, it seems as though wine and beer are not only common in biblical times, but actually a reward for having faith. And of course, let's not forget John chapter 2 verses 1 through 12, where Jesus himself creates wine from water at a wedding in Galilee. The list just goes on and on and on. You know, the use of wine and beer in the Bible it's endless. I could take hours reading them off, but you know, I think we're all starting to get the point. So, apparently, an altered state obtained by the use of the drug alcohol is part of the normal process in the cycle of life, and this is literally since Genesis according to the Bible. So why then is alcohol and the use of other drugs so frowned upon, especially by Christians? Well, alcohol could be a very destructive drug. Domestic violence, deaths from driving, accidents, and complete dysfunctionality, it's common. Not only that, alcohol destroys the brain. It destroys the liver, leads to a premature death. So it's both dangerous and it's addictive. At the very least, it gives you very, very, very poor judgment. So, how can this be? Why does God seemingly condone the use of beer and wine? In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8, it says, "Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour." Well, that's a contradiction. The key, folks, is in moderation. The question is, why do you drink or smoke pot? Is it simply to relax or unwind after a long day of work, or is it, as in my case, to cover up underlying issues? In 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 17, it says, "If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy that person. For God's temple is sacred, and you together are in that temple." Now, Our body's God's temple, so perhaps that's why I'm so sick now. Granted, I stopped it all around the age of 44, and I remained healthy for at least another decade, but abuse my body, God's temple, I'm certainly guilty. I was not a big drinker. I was never an alcoholic, but when it came to smoking pot, I smoked pot like it was going out of style. Now, I can tell you firsthand, pot is a non-addictive drug. It's not physically addictive at all. It's all up here, purely psychological. But when I did finally decide to quit, that was it. I went through no painful withdrawal. I didn't require therapy or rehab or counselors or even prayer for that matter. I didn't quit because of God. I had not accepted Him yet. It was, 15 some years ago. I quit for two reasons. After nearly 30 years of smoking weed. The first and foremost, I was between jobs, and all the places I wanted to work, they did drug testing. So, unless you want to walk around all day long with pee bottles, that didn't work out. And secondly, it was getting way, way too expensive. I mean, you build up a tolerance after years of smoking pot almost constantly. It gets to where you can only feel the best of the best. And even that doesn't last long, and it keeps costing more and more and more. So, understand, I worked, lived, and breathed stoned. But when it was time to quit, I just quit. And that was it. I just said enough is enough, and I was done with it. I think the reason they say that pot leads to other drugs is the fact that you build up a tolerance, so it's not so great, and then because it's illegal, you have to go to dealers and all this stuff, and you run into all kinds of other drugs to try. So, in my life I've experimented with all kinds of drugs, and I'm not saying that was a good thing, but that's the way it is. I told you, I'm far from perfect. Now, I'd like to say that God saved me when I bottomed out and I was doing meth. That was after my soulmate died, I told you about. And perhaps He did, but I wasn't aware of it. I know somehow I pulled myself out of the depths. This is doing methamphetamine without any help at all. And that's a feat that most meth addicts cannot do that. Okay, it just ain't gonna happen. And as I mentioned before, I should have died many times because of my own stupidity. But God was always there watching over me. And despite my rejection of Him, He was there. And that's just living proof of it. And my bad habits, they weren't simply to relax after a hard day. It wasn't the casual take or leave it single cocktail that my parents would have each night. No, it was much deeper. It went back to my childhood. I didn't like myself. I had no confidence. I thought I was a bad person. Really, I thought I was some hideous mistake placed on earth just to be ridiculed and shunned. A punching bag for the whole world. And that's pretty much the way I grew up. It wasn't fun. When I discovered pot in the 10th grade, I got stoned. And I stayed stoned for decades. And if the high took away all my troubles, I didn't care about anything. Didn't care about my life, my existence, my body. All I cared about was getting high again. That's what it's like when you're addicted, and in that way you could be mentally addicted to pot. I didn't acknowledge God in my life, and I think maybe acknowledge is a better word than accept, because my life kind of proves that God is there whether you accept Him or not. He was there. I mean, He was keeping me alive. He was getting me through some major stuff without me even acknowledging Him. He works His miracles according to His plan, whether you're going to accept it or not, it's going to happen. Some of it. He fills you with love and guidance once you acknowledge and accept Him. And your life becomes better once you follow His plan. So God provides for beer and wine and probably also marijuana. But some people use it for all the wrong reasons, like me. It was never meant to be a mask for mental anguish. We're supposed to turn to God for that. Imagine if I would have turned to God for that. 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 7 says, "Cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you." Only God's love can cure the pain from an abusive childhood or relationship. I mean, really, I wish I'd discovered this way longer, much sooner in my life. I'd have avoided so much. So, excessive use of any drug, and yes, that includes alcohol, is not condoned by God. For now, you're not only destroying His temple with your body, but you're also shutting Him out. Okay? It's there, but it's there to be used moderately once in a while with God. 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 25 goes on to say, "For you were like sheep going astray, but now you have returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls." Frankly, really folks, now that God's joy flows through me, I no longer need to be stoned. You can't get higher than God. You can't get a more uplifting feeling than to truly walk with God. He takes away the painful memories of my past. He takes it all away, just poof, gone. It all just seems to melt away, and it's replaced by a warm feeling of knowing that I am loved for who I am. God loves us all for who we are. Why don't you open the door to your heart and let Him in today? If you're watching this and you're using drugs to hide the pain of life, don't wait like I did. Turn to God now. Let Him heal you. He can. He will. And it's wonderful. Remember Psalms chapter 118 verse 6 through 7. "The Lord is with me. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? The Lord is with me. He is my helper. I look in triumph on my enemies." And verses 19 to 23, same chapter. "Open for me the gates of the righteous. I will enter and give thanks to the Lord. This is the gate of the Lord through which the righteous may enter. I will give you thanks, for you answered me. You have become my salvation. The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in our eyes." God can be your cornerstone as well. Folks, I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope I have touched the heart of just one person. If just one viewer turns to God, it's a wonderful thing. Remember, God is calling to you. He waits patiently at the door of your heart. He wants to be in your heart. And it doesn't matter how tainted your past or your life has been. Just look at me. Until next time, God bless you.